Welcome to Dark Facade, a channel dedicated to looking past the veneer of humanity and finding its true face. I will be your tour guide down this winding path of tales, ranging from the supernatural, science fiction, and twisted love. All the stories you're about to hear are assorted bits of literature that will range from the bizarre to the unexpected. So sit back, lower the lights, and allow yourself to be taken away from everyday reality to its shadowy reflection. If you enjoy our unusual content, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to receive more. Thank you. The Book of Dark Names by Katie Rogers, read by Katie Rogers. Chapter 12. Richard had been locked up in Christopher's study since they returned 2 days ago. Laura was running a steady stream of coffee into him as he worked well into the wee hours of the morning. The rest of the group concentrated on learning all they could about their new adversaries by poring over Howard and Rashad's novels. Evelyn was lying in bed upstairs trying to regain her strength after all that had happened. Between the attacks from the walls and the crossing through dimensional gates, she'd been left drained. She was awakened by the sound of the bedroom door opening. Christopher came in, carrying a tray. He smiled as she sat up to greet him. "I thought you might be hungry." He put the tray down on her lap, then sat beside her. "Thank you," she replied drowsily. "What time is it?" "Around 7:30. "Really? Wow, I slept the day away?" she said, slightly amazed. "Actually, you were out for almost 2 days," he told her. Evelyn leaned back heavily against the pillows with a look of astonishment. "I feel so decadent," she laughed in surprise. "You were driven to the edge. You're lucky to still be here at all," Christopher reminded her. "So where is everyone else?" she asked before taking a bite of her soup. "Well, Richard's barricaded himself in my study, and the rest of us have been researching the enemy," he told her playfully. She smiled softly at him while staring into his eyes. Time had changed him. The dark chestnut of his hair was now salted with gray. Lines were starting to set in around his eyes and mouth, but they did nothing to diminish him. She could still see traces of the fiery young scholar she fell in love with, burning in his gaze. "What are you thinking about?" he asked tenderly. "I'm wondering what could have been." His eyes narrowed in confusion. "I wonder what would have happened if I'd just talked to you that night, instead of listening to Kaylee." The regret in her voice resonated within him. He'd often pondered that very same thing, especially now that they both knew the truth. "I think it's safe to say things would have turned out quite differently," he smiled somberly. "Yes, but then you would not have Ella." "Your little girl is beautiful," Evelyn noted. "Yes, she is," he nodded. "What about you? Did you ever marry? Did you ever have children?" "No, no husband, no kids," she answered sadly. "Why?" She couldn't help but notice a slight edge of hopefulness in his voice. "Well, my abilities are a bit hard to explain," she replied. "Is that all?" He moved in closer. "I wanted a life and family with you. You're the only man I ever loved." Her confession brought tears to her lovely blue eyes. Christopher gently smoothed them away as he drew her in for a kiss. This tender side of him was a rare part that he reserved for only a few people. Evelyn was the best of the few. He had trusted her more than anyone and loved her past reason. To be in one another's arms as they were now was like coming home again. An abrupt knock on the door jolted them back into their current reality. "Christopher, is Evelyn awake?" Sean's muffled voice carried through the wood like an unwanted guest. "Yes, she is. Come on in," he answered. Sean poked his head in long enough to deliver a message. "Are you feeling strong enough to come downstairs, Evelyn?" I think so. Why? Richard has translated a lot of the books, and he's ready to tell us what he's found. Okay, we'll be right there, Christopher told him. After the door closed, he turned back around to face the love of his life. Evelyn had slid out of bed on the other side and slipped on a robe. He grinned at the sight of her in her pink pajamas and white robe. For a moment, he allowed himself the small pleasure of imagining this as their marriage bed. Should they survive everything that lay ahead, he was going to make that a reality. As she headed in his direction, she stumbled a little. He jumped up and caught her. "Are you sure you're strong enough for this?" he asked, concerned. "Yes," she nodded. "Just let me lean on you a little." "You got it," he grinned. Everyone had assembled in the main living room. Richard was once again playing the part of the professor about to lecture. He had the ancient books splayed out on the table and open to the passages he wanted. After Christopher and Evelyn settled in their seats, he began. "All right, everybody, we're going to have to cover a lot and make some choices, so bear with me," he sighed before plunging headfirst into the material. The room fell into a heavy silence as everyone tuned in to what he was about to tell them. According to both books, we can summon Kadolf into our midst. Where they differ is purpose. For example, the Book of Dark Names rituals all focus on making deals with these beings, while the Book of Light focuses on their destruction. "So, are you saying we can summon him to his own destruction?" Daniel asked, somewhat baffled. "Yes, but there's a catch," Richard told him. "What sort of catch?" Sean asked cautiously. "Well, we'll need one of us to act as bait." "Bait? Are you serious?" Laura laughed in disbelief. "I'm quite serious," Richard assured her. "Okay, so who's it going to be?" Daniel asked as if he already knew. "Me. I'm going to do it," Anna replied, looking directly into his eyes. "Forget it," he hissed. "Daniel, please." "I said no," he roared. "Danny, listen to me. We need to stop this guy, and this is the only way to do it," Anna argued. "Why does it have to be you? Why can't it be me?" "Because Anna has a connection to Kadolf that the rest of us don't," Richard divulged. "What is he talking about?" Daniel demanded. "You know what he's talking about. I told you when we were in that unholy temple dedicated to him," Anna replied darkly. His eyes turned as black as her reply when he realized just how right she was. Kadolf had gifted his wife with her abilities. "Anna, what are you trying to say?" Evelyn asked. "I'm saying that Kadolf made me what I am. When I died, my soul somehow got stuck in the dimension where he had been banished. The scar on my neck, it wasn't from the funeral parlor's needle. It was from him. He gave me the scar when he touched me. I felt like I'd been put in an electric chair." Anna pulled her hair aside and showed everyone what she was talking about. The flesh was raised up and looked almost as if she had been branded. When they looked closer, they could see it was a symbol of some sort, in a text that was all too familiar. "Roughly translated, it means blood goddess," Richard said, answering the group's unspoken question. "Blood goddess," Evelyn murmured. "Wait, doesn't Kadolf have a twin sister that goes by that title?" "He did have. When the Great Old Ones performed this ritual eons ago, they were successful in destroying Khafra. Kadolf managed to survive by absorbing what was left of her power before she expired. He became too strong for them to kill, so they had to banish him instead." "None of this makes sense. If Khafra's power enabled her to go in and out of dimensions, and he took her power, then why doesn't he just use it to get out? Why did he give it to Anna?" Sean asked pensively. "My theory is he couldn't use it. The energy helped him to survive, but it couldn't help him escape. I think that perhaps only a female can harness it. That would explain why he gave it to Anna. I think he intended to use her as a key to come and go anywhere he wanted, Richard explains. It seems you were too clever for him, Laura grinned. Or too lucky, Anna replied while shaking her head. No, I don't think it was luck. I think your intense fear is what helped you. You were desperate to get away from him, right? Anna nodded. Your fear triggered the doorway to this dimension, causing it to open. Your need to get away from him slammed it shut behind you. So, I guess it's pretty accurate to say that Kadaf literally chased you back into life. The ironic smile on Richard's face became infectious as it began to spread throughout the group. So which ritual do you suggest we try? Christopher shrugged. Given that we're not as well versed in this as the great old ones were, I think we should just try banishment. Killing him would require energy and time we just don't have, Richard said frankly. Okay, so how do we do this? We form a circle with Anna in the center. The group followed suit, then waited for further instructions. Richard picked up the Book of Light, then gave Anna a small, timid smile. She smiled back at him, nervously, before pulling out a pocket knife she had concealed in her palm. She grimaced as she sliced her hand open. Her husband's gasp drew her attention for a moment. His eyes were consumed with dread, and she could almost hear his heart pounding. Anna tried to reassure him with silent empathy before returning to the impending task. Kneeling down, she drew the symbol from her neck on the ground at her feet in blood. When he was certain that everything was ready, Richard told Daniel to connect everyone as he had before. As their minds began to meld together, Richard began to read from the book. The energy of their wills became a power so singular and focused, it tore through several dimensions in search of its prize. Times and places the world was yet to know spun in and out of their consciousness like fleeting dreams. They traveled on for a while until the dimensional doorway they had opened turned black. A presence made entirely of shadow was hovering at the threshold. Kadaf was about to make his entrance. Anna did her best to contain her fear because she knew it would only feed him. The darkness slithered down into their midst like a great serpent, then stopped directly in front of Anna. She stared into the void as her heart began to pound uncontrollably. Christopher tried to help her maintain some sense of calm, but he was having trouble himself. From the heart of the darkness, she saw Kadaf's face and body emerge. It was as if he and the shadow were made from each other, two concepts that were indivisible. She felt his hand reach up and cup her chin. A smile as black as the night that surrounded him spread across his lips. He was pleased, quite pleased, with the perceived gift in front of him. The twisted sexuality that ran through him was now invading those who had summoned him for destruction. The evil that he and his kind were capable of was beginning to infect them like a disease. Daniel was the first to break free of the spell. He had seen and felt the effect this ancient creature had on his wife, and he didn't like it. "Fight him! Remember why we're here. Don't let him take us down," Daniel shouted while reminding them of their purpose. The group regained their footing, then followed Richard's cue by switching verses from summoning to banishment. The instant change in Kadaf's demeanor was plain to see. His already pitch-colored eyes grew darker. The look on his face shifted from pleasure to rage in an instant. Anna quickly stepped away when he reached for her. Now it was her turn to use the group's energy to open the door to his prison. She focused everything on finding the gateway they needed. Kadaf began to shout in a strange tongue which for some reason they now could understand. He was trying to counter them, but from the desperation in his voice, it wasn't doing him much good. As Anna reached out to unlatch the gate, she felt her foot being grabbed. When she looked down, Kadaf had wrapped his long fingers around her ankle. The darkness that was part of him swirled up her leg like a virus until at last she was consumed by it. At the sight of his wife being taken by the shadow, Daniel lost focus. The link that had held them all together as one began to slip. Sean, who was still mentally tethered to his friend, reminded him to remain focused. "He's only doing this to scare you, Dan. Don't let him. Stay the course. We have to continue or all will be lost." Daniel managed to calm his fear. The doorway began to swing open, which caused a vacuum effect. The shadow that was Kadolf was being sucked up into it. Anna was slowly re-emerging from the blackness that had overtaken her. Daniel's grip on the link became strong again. Kadolf became enraged as he struggled wildly against his fate. Victory looked certain until the ancient god did something none of them could have predicted. He managed to find the weakest link and attack. In a last-ditch effort to break their chain, he pulled Evelyn into his shadow. Her instant fear was enough to give him strength to fight. Christopher tried to break through his hold. He remembered the day in the basement and how he had soothed her. He wanted her to know she was not alone in the dark. Since Evelyn was now weak and in his grasp, Kadolf had full knowledge of everyone around him. He could now play his first round of mayhem and win this fight all at once. Forming his blackness into two distinct hands, he swept Evelyn up in the air and dangled her in front of Christopher. She was terrified, which only served to make him angry. The rage fed the beast even more, and with his newfound strength, he crushed her body enough to cause death, but not directly. Her agony shot through their mental link like a bullet. Daniel fell to his knees, unable to keep it all going. Everyone followed him to the floor as the pain that bound them together left. Christopher crawled over to where Evelyn was now lying. She was gasping for breath as blood began to spill from her mouth. He knew what that meant. They both did. She was dying. "Christopher," she gargled weakly. "I'm here, Evelyn. I'm here," he cried. "I'm so cold, and it's so dark. Please, please don't let it take me." Her voice was almost childlike, and her fear was killing him. He grabbed her up in his arms, then put her here against his chest. "Listen, Evelyn. Listen. Can you hear it? You're not alone. I'm with you. I'll never leave you alone in the dark," he swore tearfully. "You were right," she sputtered ironically. "There is nothing." Her final words hit him like an iron fist in the stomach. He felt something touch his face. When he looked up, he saw Kadolf standing over him with Anna wrapped tightly in one arm. The dark god then put his index finger in his mouth. A look of ecstasy filled his eyes as he savored the bitter taste of Christopher's tears. "Thank you, Dr. Harris. Thank you," he grinned spitefully before disappearing with Anna.